Is there any public comment? None to be had. I'm going to hold off on the approval of the minutes for December 13th until the secretary gets back. Under new business, we're going to have a discussion of the budget. I've laid out some papers for you to take a look at. And it's information that we had before. It just would be helpful to have that in front of you tonight so you have it to use for it. And we can go right into the discussions of the projects. We can begin with the, number one on the list is Brooks Academy, the museum basement, the rehabilitation for $130,000. So would anybody like to open up?
Okay.
All right, we'll start with Bob.
Sure. Yeah, in reviewing it, you know, I do like the project. I think it kind of serves a couple areas. One, the preservation of the building itself, because it's very damp and moist down there. And this project, I would understand, would repair the mildew and dampness down there. But also it does help us, help the town preserve historic documents. So I think that it would be a worthy project.
Chris.
Yeah, I have no doubt that Brooks, that the Brooks application is worthy, and that the institution is in need of funding of various things, as was laid out last time. I guess my only, negative reaction to the application was, or is, I just want to make sure that enough evaluation expertise has been applied to the application, or I guess has been applied to what needs to be done to the museum as the basis for the application. And if there's a very high level of confidence that enough people with the right level of expertise relative to what the building needs have reviewed it, then I would be fine with it. But that's the only caveat I would attach to it, is that I just want to make sure that since it is one of the larger funding requests that we have this term, that that enough expertise has been applied to the evaluation to make sure that what we're funding is really deserving of the funds.
John.
Okay, so I have one sort of newbie question here, if you don't mind, which is, you know, I'm reviewing requirements for applicability here for CPC funds, and and in the historic category, it requires that either the item or property be listed in the State Register of Historic Places or be determined by the local historic commission to. So does one of those or both of them apply?
I believe, if I may,
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair, I
Mary.
believe both apply. It is on the historic register.
Okay, great, that's
And
all.
it's, I mean, from my perspective as a historic building, it's one of the two gems that we have left. It's
It's an anchor.
it's on one end of the historic district, the library is on the other. And, you know, they are both, that one in particular is a historic register building as the museum. So I do think it is within our purview to spend the money on the application.
Okay, but it didn't say that anywhere in the application, so, and I dug around a little, but probably not enough to find that information elsewhere. So Then, another question I have is, the thing that came up, which Randy, I think you were sort of referring to at the last meeting, was the question about whether or not there was some foundation work that had to be done. And I'm wondering if there's any more information available now than there was a month ago about that. And to me, I mean, I have no doubt that the overall collection of things that are outlined in the proposal in that report that we had don't need to be done and shouldn't be funded one way or another. But I still have a question about what exactly would be done with the funds that are being requested, since I think what you said last time was you probably would end up spending the money on the foundation if that was necessary, but it doesn't say anything about that in the report. So it's a little vague to me what the actual request is for, and I'm not sure how to deal with that in this context.
Go ahead, Kathy.
No, I was just wondering, could David speak to that?
Go ahead, Dave.
I recognize that some answers have been incomplete, and my first line of defense is that this final report was issued in December of 2018. So we've been collecting information as we go. After you folks asked some questions, I rechecked with the project architect. The project architect's opinion is still, from their visual observation, that the building foundation is sound. However, some questions were raised by Sean Libby about whether he agreed with that. The way we plan to proceed after talking with the architect is, the next state is to go from the general design that we've got to a specific design. That specific design would include the structural analysis as part of the project. If it turns out to be worse than the projects that the architects have evaluated, then we would have to stop and refigure. If it is as they expected, we would continue on. So the structural analysis would be part of the engineering work to get to the final design for this.
Can I follow up?
Go ahead, yes, you can.
So my question is that if we approve this, we have to present something to the taxpayers for them to approve, so they know what they're voting on at town meeting to approve or not approve. And again, I'm just not sure what that is. And somebody on this committee has to write the article for the warrant, and what are they gonna write, and where's that gonna come from? That's my question. Just
Well, that
practical
wouldn't be to
question.
David, that'll be to the board.
I know, but
And
still, the
we-
board
we-
has
we
to have something to work with.
We have
and-
the ability to designate what we choose to fund
Uh-huh.
and how we go about that funding mechanism.
The addendum in this report lists a very specific basement project.
Excuse me.
The addendum to this report issues a very specific basement project. After a fairly quick look at the three parts of it, I talked to my board and said, let's apply for the basement part of it first. So that is what we came to you with, and that's the application that stands before you. So we have a specific basement application. We have, the first significant question is it structurally adequate? And I can only rely and would answer to town meeting on our architect's professional opinion based on a visual analysis that it is acceptable. However, I would also say when I have key town officials telling me that we need to dig more, that would be part of the next round of engineering to analyze that.
All set? We can continue
For
on.
a moment, yeah, sure. I don't have a follow-up. Thank you.
Kathy, go ahead.
So on the summary, it lists foundation work in the amount of 18,000. So that involves some foundation work then? I'm looking at the basement renovation elements. That,
Yes.
how we came up with the 130,000?
Okay, you're in the basement renovation column,
Yep,
and which line item?
I'm looking at the first one, which is foundation.
Yeah, that's largely work on the inside of the foundation. So that's work to prepare the inside for the additional work they need to do to make it a climate-controlled space. It is not work on the outside of the foundation.
And did we ever resolve the question as to what exactly was going to be stored in the basement?
I don't have any new information. The
Okay.
Historic Society is the one and, that has, they've got a lot of stuff, exactly which items they feel are most sensitive and would need to go here. I cannot answer tonight.
Okay, now I think the question was whether it might sort of, the storage might bleed over into just general storage versus storage of historic documents or items.
They're going to tell you that their stuff is historic. I just can't tell you. There was a fairly detailed discussion between the Historic Society and which participated throughout this project and the project architects. There is a matrix in there as to what type of documents are being looked at and what type of storage is needed. I don't have enough personal knowledge to give you any more than that. It's going to be largely historic items stored there. Will there be some desks or something that's not historic? Possibly. But the predominant purpose is for storage of historic items.
Okay. Just, because the understanding should be that Community Preservation Act funds can't be used for non-historic items.
I think we can meet that test without any difficulty.
Mary?
David, I just have a question of, what's the setup? I understood that the Historic Society leases the building from the town. What is the how are the trustees slid in there? Do you have an agreement with the town? Do you have an agreement with the Historic Society, or both?
Okay. There is a 10-year lease agreement done in 2007, so if you do the quick math, you realize that agreement needs to be renewed.
It's up, okay.
We're in discussions with the town administrator on that right now. That is between the town of Harwich, which means the Board of Selectmen, and the Harwich Historical Society. They have their own board, and they have a part-time executive director who is responsible for running all the programs. In addition, there is the Brooks Academy Museum Commission, which is a town commission. I don't know if it was created by charter or otherwise by the Board of Selectmen, which oversees the building and what its physical needs are. So that's the basic structure. And I'm the chair of the Brooks Museum Commission.
Okay. A follow-up, if I may. So does the commission report on the work that you're doing? Does the commission act independently or with Board of Selectmen kind of blessing and approval?
Well, as early as hiring the architect for this project, I was in direct communication with the town administrator. He decides, I respond to him. He decides, maybe that's because all my years of working here, but he decides what and when goes to the Board of Selectmen. But we have kept the town administrator's office advised of this project throughout.
Okay.
And Sean Libby is day-to-day involved in the maintenance of the building, and so we've involved him as well.
Mary?
So my only concern is if we fund the basement renovation, where are the funds coming from for your further design work that you were just talking about that would include the structural engineering review? Do you have those funds available already, or would those come out of this basement renovation portion?
Again, I'm going to apologize for a partial response. If you look at the line items, there is a good design contingency in there. So I'm assuming that that's the work that we can use, the money that we can use. But I can't say beyond that.
Understood.
And I will also mention, David, you mentioned that one of the, I called you after the meeting just to see what else I could do, if anything, after last month's fun meeting. And you suggested, among other things, that I get before the Historic Commission, and we are scheduled next week. And the ones of us who will be there are myself and the museum director, Janet Cassidy.
So for your and for the board's information, our meeting is Wednesday night of next week, and then we meet again on Thursday.
Thank you.
CPC meets again on Thursday.
How's that, Mary?
I'm all set.
I'll come back here if you need anything more.
Randy?
I'm all set, actually.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, David. Is this climate control system hooked up in any way to the existing one that was put in a number of years ago with with CPA funds? There was a climate control system that was funded a number of years ago. I don't know if it's the second floor or what. You're not familiar
I'm
with
looking
that?
at Bob to see if he knows anything more, because I don't know anything more. I know they got a locked closet upstairs, which is, to
Okay.
my knowledge, and
Hope that's not it.
I'm not aware of any other space, and the architect didn't identify any space in their review of the building that would qualify for that. The storage spaces that I've seen up there are not climate controlled.
Oh, okay.
I know
Be
the
looking for
first floor
mechanicals.
is,
I'll have to
and the
look this
Cahoon
up.
room is.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
they're all, I believe they're all climate controlled now. And you don't see it because it's the small ducts that are in the floor and they're designed for historic buildings.
okay.
So you wouldn't even know.
I
this
apologize.
climate control
You know more
is.
than I do about that topic.
But the basement is not.
No, I know the basement
So, I
isn't.
mean, only from my experience, it would be a separate system because it has a whole different demand and workload because it's more
Okay, so-
moisture remover than it
Okay,
is
so they
cooling.
wouldn't be
I don't
somewhat
think they'd be-
coordinated or
I don't think
complement
so.
each other?
No.
Okay. Okay, all right. Just curious.
That would go to whether or not there was an assessment done at whatever period of time that was done to the foundation.
You mean back when they put the original
The climate control units in.
one?
Yeah, because the mechanicals are in the basement, I
I
presume?
honestly don't know where that is. I think it is in the basement.
I can find out.
They don't show that in this
Right.
basement floor plan.
Anything else from the board members?
I guess, it seems like we have two significant issues here, at least from my perspective. One is, what's gonna be stored there? We don't have a complete answer to that. And then the other thing that occurs to me here is that if Sean Libby is closely involved in the evaluation of what the building needs, maybe he could speak to it at some point. So I'm just kind of wondering if maybe we could kick this to the next meeting and have some other people participate in it to validate what the funding will be spent on. I don't know whether that's.
I can make
or-
that, I can make that request. I'm hung up on the nuts and bolts of it. The foundation of the building. I'd be willing to take a portion of this money and specifically direct it to, or even the entire amount, and specifically direct it to having that engineering process take place. Because it all starts there. If there is an event that's gonna happen to that building, and there's something there, it's gonna have to be addressed not only from the inside, it's gonna have to be addressed from the outside. And that's only through the years of experience of that. The other part of that issue is, we have a application in front of us that has a stamp in a sense. It's someone who was paid to go through that has an engineering stamp that says, this is what it is. And then we have the town saying, well, it's not appropriate. We think something else. So I have that issue to deal with. I don't know. At this point, I'm up in the air about it. I think a good idea would be to bring in Sean and ask any questions that we have about what his perception is.
I mean, a couple of the other applications that were presented to us last time around, and the time before that, I guess, you know, there were a committee of people involved in making the presentation and talking about the various reasons to support the application. And this one just, to me, it feels like it needs that.
Mary?
So I'm going to go on record as saying I'm not concerned that David's the only one here. My concern really is just from the standpoint that, to David's point with maybe we have Sean in, but we do have an engineering stamp or an architect stamp, not an engineering stamp.
No, it's an architect stamp.
I'd be more inclined to want to hear from a structural engineer that's actually, maybe an engineer that's taken a glance at it. Not, obviously, there's no time for somebody to do a full study between now and next week, but.
Well, that's why I said, I'd be willing to give him the entire amount of money, with the caveat that we have a grant agreement that says specifically the engineering process has to take place first.
But then,
And he can spend that money for that engineering process, and we can simply take the balance back. He can come with a new application.
so I will say this, if I may.
Go ahead.
He's dealing with a commission, so David can't speak for his commission.
I understand.
So he's gonna have to have a meeting to be able to determine whether they'd be willing to amend their application. Is that what the
If I
thought
may,
is in that sense?
again, I'm going to point to the fact that we received this final report in December.
Understood.
So I'm confident that my commission would support. If you go ahead with the sort of conditions you just stated, that means we go as far as engineering, which is what I tried to say a little bit. I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I'd be comfortable just with the engineering money.
I understand, but we don't know
But-
what that is.
No, we don't. I did a rough estimate, but I think it would be much safer to do the sort of grant agreement you suggested. I feel that's within the scope of our application, and I feel if the engineering proves to be more difficult than our architect has first stated, we can't go any further until we retool it and come back here. And whatever words you want to throw at that, that all works for me, and I'm confident to say, without talking to them, that that works for my commission.
Bob?
Yeah, just to, not totally understanding this, but if we allocate the money, the 130 as is, and the project proceeds as in its normal course, and if it turns out the architect was right, the project gets completed, fine. If they do look at the engineering aspect and say, nope, we gotta stop, wouldn't they have to stop the whole project and then say, turn the money back in and come back in another year? Because you can't ask for 5,000 more, I would assume, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure I see the harm in not going ahead with the 130,000, because, I mean, they may run into a problem and have to turn the money back.
Well, again, pardon me for jumping in. One of the main reasons this is before you now is, see, the whole process of going through you folks, going to town meeting, it takes so long to go through that cycle. So I moved as quickly as I could to get something before you this year. Yes, it's got some holes in it, and you've done a good job of uncovering some of those. But seriously, exactly what you outlined would take us as far as I can reasonably expect at this point.
Anyone else?
I'm not sure it's clear to me what you just agreed to.
We haven't
Well,
voted, so we
no,
haven't
no.
agreed to anything.
I-
What
I-
I
I
have
don't mean- I
suggested,
don't mean a formal agreement. I'm not sure what you just agreed with Dave about exactly.
what I said again, was to take the 130,000, put it within a grant agreement, and specifically say it's for use for the engineering portion of the foundation only.
Okay,
That gives him an opportunity to go out, hire an engineer just to do that particular study. He gets it done, he's got the money to do it. Then he comes back the following year with a new application. Is that what you
not,
understood? or-
I guess I may have misunderstood a little bit. I understood that if the $130,000 is approved, we would proceed at first only with the engineering. But if that structural engineering identifies no issues beyond what this architect has said, then I felt, under what I thought you said, that we can keep going within that approval.
David, I'm one vote. The chair has heard it, they can make their decision.
That's what I thought I was.
They can make their decision. And I don't have a problem with that.
So,
Harry?
My only comment to David's point there is, I mean, then he at least has the funds to do the basement if he can go forward. But if we agree to put the stipulation in that structural engineering has to be approved and determined that no work is necessary structurally, then I'd be more comfortable that we're not wasting money and that they're not losing more time on kind of getting that basement watertight.
let me try again. If you approve this project with the condition that the first step has to be proceeding with the structural engineering, and that the results of that have to be satisfactory to the town administration, and if you wish, to this commission, and that, if that it proves to be successful, that we can continue on the balance of the $130,000 project, that's the part that I think would be a good way to go about it.
Anybody else? John?
I'm sorry, I hate to bring up one more issue to complicate things, but I'm going to anyway, just because I'm trying to clarify this for myself anyway, is one of the other issues that came up last time was about the elevator. And the fact that the elevator requires installation of the proposed elevator that was part of the architect's plan, requires modifications to the basement, which logically should be done at the same time all the other work is done. So then my question is, this funding that you're asking for now, does that include any work in preparation for the installation of an elevator? Or if we proceed and agree on what was just discussed now, does that mean that next year or some following year, some rework is going to have to be done in order to accommodate the planned and hoped-for elevator?
First answer is I really don't know. Second answer is, if you look at the list of items, under the elevator is included foundation work of $5,688. That work is not included in what I've submitted to you under the $130,000. So if you look again at that, you'll see the column over to the right on basement renovations. When I looked at this quickly, that's what I applied for. However, then it came out, when I talked to the architects the second time, the problem with doing just the basement was coordination, and that it would be a good idea to do the elevator work at the same time. I did not ask the architect exactly what the money attached to that would be. So all I'm seeing tonight is the $5,688, plus any contingencies that get multiplied to that. That's my best guess.
Anybody else? Kathy?
Well, I just, along John's thought, I mean, I would imagine that other mechanicals would be involved then. I mean, they would want to do some pre-electrical work, I would assume. No,
I wonder why you're asking.
no, I'm just assuming that they would want to do pre-electrical, at least, you know, get some stuff done. So, I think we had some questions, I'm glad you brought up the elevator, last time about the entrance and moving the entrance and the reason for moving the entrance and, you know, was it specifically for the elevator? And so what comes first, I guess, was our conversation.
You know, ideally, we would do all three parts of this together. One of the things I can do is proceed, it's not quite as much as I'd like, but what I can do is proceed with the structural work, the structural engineering study, and we can get a better fix for how the other three pieces are. We're going to be a year delayed in terms of our main grant, our main request for an outside grant, so I won't know about that for a year, but I'm estimating that if you add up the three pieces at their 450,000, you add the various engineering and so forth, we're up to close to 560,000. I think if I would apply to this commission for half of that, which is 280,000, pardon me for throwing all these numbers out so quickly, that might have been a better application, but it wasn't. I have trouble seeing how you guys can go from 130 to 280,000. I do think that we can still do the basement project, and I think I can also proceed with the structural engineering portion of it for this year, if that's all I can do. You know, I'm sorry this is somewhat confusing, but it's you know, I'm sort of working on the fly here, and I'm giving you the best answers I can.
And that's appreciated.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving on. Cape Housing Institute, $7,500. Now, I'm getting lost in the numbers. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I don't have any questions. I just, I have heard nothing but good things about the Institute, and people on my committee that have attended have had nothing but great things to say about it, and I'm in support of us continuing our funding to continue it, particularly as we are now starting to, as the Affordable Housing Trust is starting to move forward, there's going to be a lot of kind of educational aspects for it, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to get involved and really see what's involved in us getting more affordable housing in Harwich. So, just like to voice my support.
Kathy?
I think it's important that we support this. I think it's important that we show our support as multi-towns on the Cape towards this.
Randy?
I think it's worthy of our support.
John?
It's sort of a no-brainer for me. I think we should just not dwell on it, just support it.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. My main question, which got answered really well last time, was how do you track success around the investment? And I thought the answer to that was really what I was looking for, so I'm fine with it.
Well,
I'm fine with it. Is this the first year of this request?
No, second.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah. No, I think it's
it was
fine.
10,000 the previous.
Right.
Okay. Moving on. The Affordable Housing Trust for $340,000. Who would like to begin with this one? All right, Mary.
Mary?
Shocking. So we had our housing committee meeting earlier this week, and my entire board, I think I can speak for my entire board, we were all very pleased with the last agenda that we saw from the Housing Trust. They were at least looking at parcels and being engaged and looking towards moving forward, which to me is a lot to have gotten to start accomplishing. Whether any of those parcels pan out, the fact that there are items that they are looking at and engaging on with CDP as our now consultant. My board was very pleased with that. And everyone was in attendance, so we had a full board on Monday night. So I'm encouraged by that. I am in full support of the trust. I think it's the only way, really, that the town is going to start to make headway on our housing production plan that we adopted last year, that the town adopted, that the planning board supported, that the housing committee supported, at least from my recollection. So I'm in favor. The questions that I still have a couple of questions on really the portion that's going to the consultant. I think we need to support the consultant. I think the trust needs a consultant to get it going. I don't know whether we've seen a copy of that contract. I know there were discussions back and forth on 20 hours versus 10 hours versus what the scope of work was on that. I still have a couple of questions on that, but not so much that I wouldn't. I think they need a consultant in order to keep it moving forward, because the consultant's staffing the trust. So I don't know if there's anybody here to answer those questions. I'm from the trust. Oh, hi. Do you, through you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Just identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Judith Underwood. I'm from the Housing Trust. And I'll try to answer questions. We are new.
So the question I had with respect to the contract originally was, my understanding was that it was originally billed out at 10 hours per week, and then at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and then at our last meeting, the discussion was maybe moving that to 20 hours a week. I didn't know if we were paying time and materials on that, or how that was gonna get tracked. I mean, is it?
I think that's the town administrator and the planners. I think they had mapped all that out. Because the last meeting that we had, CDP came and did a great presentation. I don't know if any of you saw the video. And they had quantified the hours that they would need to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that
it was
at
a
your
very
last-
good plan.
That was at your last meeting?
Yes, which was like 2 weeks ago, I think,
Okay,
3 weeks ago, yeah.
all right,
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in.
go right ahead.
Was there a number attached to that?
Do you know? Yes. Oh, here we go.
Andrea Aldana, Director of Housing Advocacy at the Community Development Partnership. So the $30,000 is a flat fee, and it was initially scheduled to be 10 hours a week. But because we're starting, I guess, halfway through your fiscal year, the idea is that since we wouldn't be paying for time and materials, and it would still be that same flat fee, we could use the balance of those hours to ramp up, because there's a lot of onboarding to do, but it wouldn't change the scope or the contract.
So the point is you're fitting in the same amount of work, but in a lesser period of time, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All set, Mary?
I am,
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Randy?
I think this is something that we really should support. As everyone knows, there's a big housing shortage, affordable housing. Many young people can't afford to live in town. And I think the Housing Trust, and if you have a housing trust, you definitely need somebody to oversee it. So I think this is something that deserves our support.
All set? Chris?
Well, given that there's a state mandate to achieve a certain percentage of affordable housing, there's a certain amount of logic going in to support this application. It's a big number, and the worry, because I guess a worry could be, because we don't have a lot of data yet on how the funding would be used, is even though it's a big number, you know, do you just chip away at small things and therefore not really achieve a lot over the long run? But for me, the light bulb moment in the last meeting was when Charlene talked about the supplementary grant work that she had done in Truro, and then elaborated on that by talking about the various grants that can be applied for to augment this amount. So then you're talking about an amount that is significant enough to really do something with. And so the combination of the state guidelines around this and the fact that there's more money to be acquired here makes it a logical application for me, and I could certainly support it.
Kathy?
So we voted last year about 470,000 towards the actual funds that are available in the trust. And we're asking to add another 310,000 to that, because I don't believe any funds have been spent as of yet, correct? Yeah. Okay, so that's, what, $780,000?
Is it 310 or 340? I thought it was
310, well, because I'm taking out the, I'm taking out the funding for the
Okay.
position. I'm just talking about actual funds that are gonna be available
Got it.
for whatever purpose.
Yep.
You know, I know that they're just getting started, and I don't wanna, you know, bind them up. I'm in favor of funding it. I think moving forward, like, for the next funding year, we need to have a real plan, though. We need to have a plan that says, you know, what the focus is gonna be. You know, is the focus gonna be purchasing of land for, you know, density development? Is it gonna be, you know, towards rental kind of situations? Is it gonna be for buy-down situations? And that really makes a difference as to how much funding you need. So I don't really have a problem this year with funding this, but I really think in the future we need a real plan. And I would assume that, given the next, you know, 9 months or so, that will come from the trust. I'm hopeful.
No, it is, and part of it is to see what parcels are available and what you can do with it, and that's why it's great we're working with these guys, because they have so much experience. And so you need to look at all three of those to make that concrete, and it's not gonna be a one-step forward.
Good.
It depends on the opportunity.
Step to the microphone.
I'm sorry. It really, you're absolutely correct, and I think what we're doing right now, and come on up here and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're looking at what's available, and they're sorting through a lot of different opportunities. And so there's not going to be necessarily one track this year, but going forward, that will be in place, yeah.
Well, right now, you're, what, looking at town-owned land?
Yes,
So that's just one
one vehicle.
part, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
All set, Kathy?
Yep.
John?
Yeah, I think supporting affordable housing should be a big part of our focus. So it makes a lot of sense to me to be supporting the things that the town is doing to move forward on that. And it's a bit of a jump start, but I think we have to have a little faith and move ahead. So I'm very supportive of this.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the other comments that it is something that is absolutely needed, and I think this is a good vehicle to do it.
Chris?
I just wanted to jump on what Kathy said. I couldn't agree more, and that's sort of what I was getting at when I said I know there's not a lot of data right now, but there's an expectation as we move forward that more data will be accumulated and we'll be smarter about, and we'll be smart enough to formulate a plan around what's going to happen going forward. And I also think it'll be very interesting a year from now, assuming these guys will be back, to find out what has happened in terms of outside supplementary grants, because I think that's a really important part of this.
Mary,
I'm good.
you're all set? Kathy?
Yeah, just to add on to that, they'll be reporting to us twice a year
Yeah.
anyway, so we'll get some updates. And in addition, I really hope that we, get a chance to at least explore what other sources of revenue there might be, in addition to grants.
Yeah. Yep.
Anybody else from the board? Okay, well, moving on. Lifeguard stands project. Amount requested $37,950. We'll start with Kathy.
Oh, lifeguard stands. Just a quick question, we had asked if the materials might be, looked into as something that was more longer lasting.
If it could be broken down.
Eric
Yeah.
Levy, Recreation Director. The materials that were suggested, the Trex materials, I think it's Trex, Tyvex, I believe, and the pressure-treated wood, ASICs, that's it.
ASICs,
I
yeah.
always do that. That's what was suggested by the Highway Department that was going to put it together. The ASICs would be for the seating of the stand and the roof, and the pressure-treated wood would be for the base, because that's known to be more stable for the weight of the actual stand. So that's what led to their thinking of those materials. And I did follow up with them on that, and they stand firm with thinking that's the best way to go.
So the estimate is based using those materials, because
Yes.
ASIC can be kind of a little bit more
Pricey,
expensive, yeah.
Yeah, well, originally they were thinking all pressure-treated wood, and we talked more and more about it to make them last as long as we possibly can, and that upped the price a little bit, but that $3,000 per stand includes that ASICS material.
Okay, and then the other question was the storage of them.
Yep, I followed up with that as well. They are able to store them if we choose to do that, just to preserve them longer. They could fit them in the highway barn and kind of stack them up and keep them good throughout the winter months.
Well, that's great, then I'm all for it. Done.
Mary?
I have no questions, those are my same questions, so, how it was gonna happen, so.
I support this. I think it fits, as far as I understand it, fits the definition of what CPA funds are for, so, and I think I had some of those questions
You did.
last time.
You did.
And I agree, AZEC is not a great structural member, so it all makes sense to me, so I support it.
But it is good to sit on because you don't get
Yes.
splinters.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my thought.
Right.
Brandy?
I think this is something that obviously there's a need to replace these things, and, it seems like a worthwhile thing.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm fine with this proposal.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think from a safety standpoint, it's kind of a no-brainer, so I'm fine.
Okay, moving on. Sand Pond restroom facility for $125,000. Chris?
Well, this one's a little pricey, and that, leaves me slightly queasy, but what caught my ear last time, among other things, was that this is the last facility that is not ADA compliant. And I think ADA compliance across all of these facilities in the town is the right thing to do, and I think it becomes something of a calling card these days for Harwich in competing against other towns for this kind of, for the use of this kind of facility. So I'm okay with this. I'm for this one as well.
Bob?
Yeah, I do have concerns about this project. One, because what I heard in the presentation was Sand Pond was really kind of a very low-use, not popular place to swim. I've gone down there and looked, and the beach isn't that pleasant. You know, they've let the growth come in so that you can really only use like maybe half, maybe 2/3 of the beach. And I've seen, you know, work had been done previous years to make one part of the beach with the steps going down or whatever, fine. But what I would like to see on this is a more complete master plan for Sand Pond. I know we've mentioned was it kayaking as a great potential, and I think that's a great idea. I'd like to see a plan to maybe restore the beach. The building that's there, I think it hasn't been taken care of at all. Shingles are falling off of it, yet I think structurally it's a good building, and if you were doing kayak type thing, it's a good storage building. I think that's what it was originally for, was storage of boats and things. The idea, the ADA compliant, totally agree with, but the path leading up to the bathroom is not ADA compliant. It's just dirt, standing, it's not pretty, it's not attractive. It doesn't, actually, there's really no good connection between the beach and the bathroom. So, you know, I would like to see a plan that would include a walkway, maybe even a cement walkway for ADA compliance. Again, I think it just needs, before we spend the money, I'd rather see a whole master plan to restore that pond, you know, to restore the pond and make it very useful all around.
And that,
Go ahead, Eric.
and that is our goal, to have a master plan. We have grand ideas of bringing that beach back to prominence in town, but it is, the way we look at it is right now it's still a town beach. It's got a large parking area. It's less used than it used to be, but it still gets crowded on, you know, beach days. People do go there. We're trying to keep, you know, if nothing else ever happened, we need a new bathroom. In addition to that, what you said about the beach and improving the beach area, that's something I spoke to the harbor master about, highway department about maybe clearing some trees that need to be cleared, getting some dredge sand there. These are things that could happen aside from the master plan, whether it's playgrounds or basketball courts or any of that stuff, so.
And that would be great, but again, I think for restoring the beach, I mean, CPA funds can be used for that,
Sure.
as far as I could
Sure.
read it. And you know, I think as I say, the whole project, I'd almost like to see, or if you had the master plan now and say this is phase one,
Yep.
that'd be great, but I don't know what your other parts of the master plan is.
Yep. Well, yeah, the only reason we didn't do like this as a phase one, like Brooks Park that we just did all the phases, is because whether there's a phase 2, 3, 4, 5, the commission and the department felt that a new bathroom needs to be put in either way to complete the ADA accessible, including walkways. You know, anywhere we put it, we're going to add walkways. And then as far as the cost of it, a lot of the high cost, and it is a high cost, is because it's a precast concrete restroom, and they're guaranteed for 99 years. So we decided to spend more now and hopefully save more later. So, but we figured there will be phases to this project going forward, but this is the bare minimum, something we have to get done no matter what happens in the future.
And is that the perfect placement for the bathroom?
Well, that's, we're going to talk with conservation and highway about where we can put it.
Right.
Because that one's been there a long time, so
Right.
it may be grandfathered in that spot, but we'll make sure it's in a spot that's
Well,
allowed.
can it even be moved closer?
Yeah,
to the
well,
beach?
if it can get
Because
any
the
closer,
the
it
other
would.
ones are really nice and close to
Yep.
the parking area.
If it can get any closer,
This is
it
a little
would.
further away, and it's, you know.
No, I know, yeah, any, as close as we can get and convenient as we can get is where we'll put it.
John?
I as well went by I had never been to Sand Pond before you made your presentation, and I went by and had a look. It's a nice pond, and things always look a little dreary, you know, off-season when it's getting chilly. Even Red River Beach, it's beautiful, but it's a little dreary down there in the middle of the winter. So, you know, I get what you're talking about, but I don't think, personally, I don't feel like I need to see a master plan in order to agree. It is a pretty big expense, but it makes sense to me. And There may be restrictions on where you can put
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
put a new facility, but I think it basically makes sense, and might as well move on and then talk about the other things.
Kathy?
My biggest concern coming here tonight was this project, and my biggest concern was that there wasn't a plan. I totally agree with you that, I would have liked to have seen something in place as to how we were going to get more people there, how we were going to increase the use of the pond for an investment of $130,000 or something in a bathroom. Is Sand Pond going to become a destination, and what for, and what else are we going to do? I think the ADA compliance issue is a big issue, and I hadn't thought of that, and I think that's important. I will say that as much as I would like to see a plan, I trust that there's going to be a plan, and I think that given we don't have a lot of applications this year for our funds, that this would be worthwhile funding, because I'm afraid that in future years, we might not have the funds for something like this. So even though you don't have a plan, I'm gonna go for it. I'll support it.
Mary?
So, I really was not worried about a plan. I understand why my colleagues are concerned about it. I too I have been to Sand Pond. I haven't been to Sand Pond in 30-plus years. So, I haven't used the beach there in 30-plus years. But that being said, for me, the number one concern is really to make it accessible. And what strikes me is, I recall from town meeting last year, a student at Monomoy stood up to speak about the restrooms at White House Field, I believe, or at the football field, because his grandmother couldn't go to the game because she couldn't use the restroom. And that made an impression on me at last year's town meeting, and I kind of feel the same way with this. It's probably a pond that's more easily accessible to a lot of people, and I tend to think we should do it one way or another. And to Kathy's point, it is true, we may not have funds in the future. So I'd like to see that done now while we can.
Randy?
Well, they don't call them necessary rooms for nothing.
Right.
So I think this is a necessary thing.
Anything else from the board?
How about you?
I'm the rec advocate, and I'm sitting at the chair, so I'm not gonna have an opinion
right.
about it.
You can still have an opinion.
I can, but I choose not to at this point.
Okay.
Okay, White House Field Improvement Project for $55,000.
And we're sick of looking at Eric.
So we'll open it up with Randy.
This is for the scoreboard and I think that's, thousands of people come there to watch the game, and, I think that's probably a good thing.
I should interject, there was one question about the lightning arrest system.
Yep, as far as the scoreboard that we're looking at that's in there, on that estimate, there's no lightning protection plan. There is guarantees, 5-year guarantees on everything, except for natural disasters. I spoke with them about lightning protection plans or lightning suppression devices, and that can be done. It's in the range of $1,000 to $2,000, which is well within our contingency on the project. In addition to that, they said most people don't get it because it rarely happens, even though it's happened twice since I've been here. And insurance covers the cost once it happens. So it is a possibility. We'll continue to look further into it, but it is, if we do choose to do it, it is within the plan, the contingency. So.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Yep.
John?
Thank you for bringing that point up, since I think that was my question. So my follow-up is $1,000 to $2,000 for what? insurance with them, or you're buying specific hardware which protects?
It's hardware which protect, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's hardware that protects it from lightning strike. I think grounding, some way of grounding it. So because it becomes hardware, it would fall into the guarantee on all the hardware of the scoreboard. That is guaranteed within the current.
So, wait a minute.
Okay.
Are you saying that if you spend this extra $1,000 or $2,000, then the guarantee applies against lightning damage, but if you don't spend that money, the guarantee does not apply against lightning damage?
Yes. Yeah.
But the town would have insurance anyway that would pay for it, except,
It would be covered by insurance anyway, either way, yeah, yep.
But then would be subject to I'm sorry. would
Go ahead,
be
Mary.
Yeah, right.
Subject to a deductible.
Yeah.
And do we know what our deductible is on things like that?
I'm not sure. It's usually the two times it's happened since I've been here, it's been part of a big storm. So it's been lumped into a large insurance request. I know the rec has never had to pay out a deductible. It may have been whatever the deductible was on the whole lump thing.
We were just told that it was $1,000 for a deductible, so.
Probably right, yeah.
Fortunate to have our finance director in the room. Thank you, Carol.
so, but then what's the downtime?
Well,
If there's a lightning strike and it takes the thing out, is the downtime, are they gonna be there in an hour to fix it?
I'd have to find that out. The times it has happened before when we didn't have any of that, you know, it was down for a couple days.
Yeah.
So,
John, Bob,
yeah.
John, I'm sorry, do you have any more?
No, go
No,
ahead.
but if, to continue with the lightning, yes,
Yep.
the downtime itself is well worth the extra 1,000 or 2,000.
Yeah.
If you can fit it in the budget, definitely.
Yep.
I would encourage you to do that.
Yep.
And yes, it's a great project.
Mary?
I'm in favor. I didn't, obviously, I knew the field was used by the Cape Cod Baseball League and the high schools. I didn't realize how much NCAA attention it received. So I'm certainly in favor. I think it should be, if we're renting out the facility, we should have the equipment there for the team. So
All set?
all set for me.
Kathy?
I actually went to White House Field this last summer with I took my 4-year-old grandson to the All-Star game. Yeah, so I think it's a worthwhile project. I mean, I think that the excitement that was there, was great for the town of Harwich. So I'm in favor of it.
Anybody else? Chris?
Just my 2 cents, I guess. I'm glad to hear about the 5-year warranty. That was one of the questions I had last time. So that sounds good. I go to a lot of games at White House, and the scoreboard really sucks. So,
Just to remind you, we are being, it's long, we could be live.
It stinks.
as I say, I go to a lot of games there. So I think it'll be a great improvement. It's the only significant improvement the field seems to need right now, and I think you make that improvement and the crowds get a lot happier there. So I think it's a real good funding request.
Okay, I guess we're all set. We're gonna move on. Thank you, Eric. The bike crossings at Depot Road and North Howard, your requested amount, $27,000. Go ahead, Kathy.
Like I said last, when they presented, that it was their best presentation as of yet in terms of its, completeness, and I'm in favor of it.
And I had to hammer them. Mary?
I agree with Kathy.
John?
I have no judgments about their presentation, but it seems like it's a worthwhile continuation of the work that they've been doing, and so, and the bike path through Harwich is another, important draw for Harwich, and safety really is an issue. So I'm in favor of it.
Randy?
I'm not in favor of it. It's, at some point in time, people have to, deal with not having everything signalized and cross the street on their own. So I wouldn't support that.
Bob?
No, I really like these units, and I am in support of it. I do agree with Randy on one thing, is it gives license for people to run across the road without stopping, the bicyclists, without stopping like they should. But still, it's still an overall, I think, safety thing that's needed.
Chris?
Yeah, I like the additional safety. I think the ones that are out there now are an improvement, but again, back to Randy's point, sort of, when they stop working, that creates a problem, because there's an expectation, drivers now, when they see them, when they see that they're not on, their expectation is that they can fly through the crossings, which they never used to do, and they do occasionally go down.
Yeah.
They occasionally go no-op, and I worry about the danger inherent in that, but by and large, I think it's a safety improvement, and so I would be in favor of it.
I didn't vote for this particular article last year because I was really concerned with the software. And after asking the individuals this year, that they have made leaps and bounds apparently with some of that software, that I'm fine with that. Okay. Last but not least, anybody else have anything to okay, moving on. The revetment extension of Red River Beach, the amount requested, $100,000. Mary?
So, I can't remember whether we had any follow-up questions that,
Well,
with Amy.
Yes, we did. And that follow-up question was the length of the work that was gonna be done for that area of
Yeah.
sand. And I believe, if I'm not correct, it's gonna be 50 feet.
Isn't that, it's not on the plan?
There was something specific that she,
She was still looking into.
Yeah,
as
that
to
she was
how
still
far it
looking
could
into.
go. If I can, I guess, from my perspective, I guess I'm concerned with how much sand is going into the river on the other side. At some point, somebody's gonna stop us from doing that, I would think. And if this is a better way to go and we can get it permitted, then my understanding, I thought, was that we were gonna try and get this revetment permitted, and if they have the money, they'll put in the application, it's either gonna be up or down. And if they say no, then the money gets reverted to us, so.
Right.
I personally think Red River Beach is too, important a place to watch that, half of that parking lot fall in. So I'm concerned with that, and I personally think from Amy's comments, the fact that it should improve the flow by not having all that extra sand go into the mouth of the river, is the double benefit, from my perspective, but, I wonder if we shouldn't wait on that one for her for next week, if she's sick today.
Kathy?
A couple things. It's not half the parking lot that's gonna fall in, it's a couple little, it's the turnaround. That they're
was
Wait a
concerned.
minute,
I thought it was
mentioned that
further back.
from-
Turnaround that they're concerned about at the end. It's not half the parking lot, it's the turnaround. But anyway-
Exaggerated, but I do think it's more than just the turnaround, because I thought it was back farther than just that,
No,
just
I
the
don't
tip.
think so. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
No.
A couple things. One of our questions for, when Amy presented, she had not gone before real estate and open space, and she hadn't gone before conservation.
Okay,
Okay, so, speaking for real estate and open space, okay, she came and presented at our committee meeting. We happen to have a member who's also a member of conservation on our committee. And I will tell you that conservation was not necessarily united in how they felt about this project. They hadn't met yet, but there were some different opinions. So, Real Estate and Open Space voted to support the project in whatever way conservation supported it,
Okay,
with the caveat that no open space funds be used for this, only undesignated. That is how Real Estate and Open Space felt. I'm just
Okay.
passing that on,
Yep.
okay? I'm just saying. Second, we don't know how conservation voted. I mean, I know Amy had gotten all the signatures in time by December 15th, but I can't make a vote. I could not vote unless I heard from Amy as to how conservation voted on this, whether they were supportive of it or not.
It's reasonable,
I don't disagree.
reasonable request.
Well, I'm the conservation representative here, and I should be able to answer
Yeah,
that
oh, then
definitively,
go ahead.
but I can't.
Okay.
That's, I believe we voted on and approved it, but I don't want to, I should have been prepared to answer that question, and I'm not. I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's all right. It's, that's why we're having this next meeting.
Anyway, I go by there all the time, and I've been looking, and even, I mean, one of the things Amy said was that, which I didn't realize at all, was that the town of Harwich has been, on a very regular basis, adding sand there. And just, you know, since sometime in December going by there, there've been some very high tides down there. And it's really been carving away behind there, and it's a pretty acute problem at this point. And again, I can't speak as the sort of expert Amy is, but you see a lot of changes around here due to sand moving around. And it's not hard for me to imagine that thing, you know, if it gets a purchase, getting a bite in to where the turnaround is, that whole thing could change quite a bit. And I think if there is disagreement, and I don't really want to speak about that, but, you know, there is a point of view that we should just let nature take its course, I suppose.
Okay.
I don't support that point of view.
Okay.
I think that we need to maintain that area. Red River Beach is one of the jewels of Harwich, and we need to, you know, make sure it stays that way. And of course, it's not half the parking lot. It's down there,
I
but
exaggerated.
once,
I
But-
got
but-
Cosmic happy.
but I support the exaggeration, because I think once that erosion starts, who can say where it's gonna end? I mean, so I'll just leave it at that. I support.
We'll come back to you, young lady. Bob?
Yeah, so my concern was actually not about the parking lot. My concern is the silting of Red River. And some years ago, the town spent money to improve the flow in the whole marsh behind Red River, all the way through, so it could ecologically kind of restore the way it was. And I want to make sure that investment back then is good and that we maintain it. So it's the sand I'm concerned about blocking it. And as long as we keep dumping it, it's just going to block it totally.
Well, I think the peril of doing nothing down there would be like a winter storm comes along and undermines the existing revetment. And it just is gonna be a domino effect. And before long, the parking lot starts to fall in, and more of the sand on the other side is just gonna collapse. And, you know, it's just a bad situation down there, and I think if you don't take care of it, it's only gonna get worse.
Chris?
Yeah, this one was, I really had to pay attention to this one because it was thick, you know, the presentation was just heavy. But by the time it was done, I was convinced that, A, it's probably commercially important for Harwich because the entire parking lot is going to be lost. Otherwise. And B, from a conservation standpoint, just echoing what the guys over there said, I think it's the right thing to do. So I came away pretty enthusiastic about it being a good application for this funding, although I had to pay close attention.
Just to back up Mary's point about the parking lot being lost. In all seriousness, if you were to go up to Truro, North Truro, go up to Highland Light Road, go to the end, take a left, follow that all the way to the end. That is what Cape Cod used to look like. There was a massive parking lot there. It's no longer there.
Yeah.
So, and it's like watching Chatham. Chatham changes every year, year and a half, 2 years. So
Orleans.
if we can do something to help that process, we're not gonna stop it. You're not gonna stop nature. But if we can do something to just help it along so we keep the parking lot for a longer period of time, I'm in favor. Go ahead, John.
By the way, Randy mentioned it might start undermining the revetment. No, it already has
Right.
started undermining the revetment. On the north end of the jetty there, where it just makes a little bit of a turn, it's already beginning to crumble a little bit there. So that's not a hypothetical. It's already happening.
Now,
No, I just wanted to remember that Jim's point at the last presentation was he was concerned about the estimate and that it really wasn't, that extensive an estimate. And he was looking for Amy to get something, a little bit more concrete.
Remember that.
And if I might just ask John a question. So
try
is
to
it your opinion that, as your recollection, that the Conservation Commission voted in favor of the project as it was presented?
You know,
you're putting him right on the
you
spot.
Sorry.
are very much putting me on the spot, and I'm really embarrassed to say that my memory isn't that good. And
Okay.
I cannot.
All right, that's
I mean,
fair.
I would rather just make sure that I have, I'm telling you the right thing than go speculating.
Okay,
So now I'm gonna put Kathy on the spot.
okay.
Open space, community preservation fund, allowable expenditure purposes. GLC 44B/5. Open space, land to protect existing and future well fields, aquifers, recharge areas, watershed land, agricultural land, grasslands, fields, forests, fresh salt, marshes, and other wetlands, rivers, oceans, streams, lakes, etc., dunes, beaches, coastal lands. It's allowable.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So,
Is that in reference to what I said about real estate and open spaces?
Yes.
Well, can I clarify?
sure, go
Okay.
ahead.
No, I just want to clarify in that, they felt strongly that the open space bucket, as you will, should be preserved for open space purchases and preservation if possible, not necessarily something that was more of a recreational kind of thing.
So they were incorrect.
They're not incorrect, it was their opinion.
Okay,
But
Fair enough.
That's
that
all.
was an
Fair enough.
individual who happens to be a member of the Conservation Commission.
No, that was not the person who did that.
Okay.
This was a general committee.
Oh, the Open Space
Yes,
Committee.
it was the
Open
Open
space.
Space Committee. And I'm only just
Was
passing
voicing
that on.
tell
that
them what you do. Kathy chairs
I'm the
the
chair
open.
of the Real Estate
Yeah,
Open Space.
right, yes.
And I
think
remember the meeting.
I
Just
don't-
kidding,
I'm
just
not sure I'm
kidding.
ever gonna live that one down, but
Touche.
probably there'll be another one that'll make you forget about this
That's
one.
okay. No, it was the opinion of the entire committee, not just an individual.
okay.
And I am just passing that along.
Yeah,
Um,
well,
Okay, is there anything else? Chris?
Kathy made an important point about Jim's comment last time about the estimate. I had forgotten that, but now I remember it.
Right.
So what needs to happen there? Does she need to come back with something tighter?
We
or-
have that's why we scheduled a meeting for next week.
Okay.
So next Thursday, she can come back and any questions you may have, she can,
Okay.
and I will pass that information on to her to make sure she's here. So. Is there, Bob?
Just more of a, how it works, but you'd mentioned that the Open Space Committee doesn't want their bucket to be dipped into on this.
No,
But-
it's their opinion that they would like to see the funds, since they're limited every year, to be used for open space purchases for preservation, conservation, and protection of water quality. Not something that was more in the recreational.
But you see,
area.
that's the different opinion. I don't consider
Yeah,
this
no.
recreational
No, that's fine.
money. I consider
That's
preserving the
fine.
marsh,
That's
which
fine.
is open space. And
Yep.
that's,
John?
So, a follow-on question to the Open Space Committee
Yes.
is, given there aren't any other requests for funding this time around for those categories, does the Open Space Committee feel that we should hold off and save this money?
I think it was just their opinion that it was more of in the recreational vein. That's all I can say. And again, it's just a committee's opinion.
Okay.
And she's their chair, and she's,
I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, typically land purchases have run us usually over and above what's available in the
Big
open
money,
space.
Right, it's big
Yeah.
money, right.
So we end up going into the undesignated area. So, that's all.
And I just see it from again, a different point of view. And I see it as part recreational, part open space. And when you look into the guidelines, it's there, so.
and can we then allocate half out
Yes,
of
we
one
can,
and
we
half?
have that ability.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Anybody else? Okay, there's more information we need on this application. And were we looking for anything else from anybody on the other applications?
Where did we leave the number one?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Was there some,
Brooks is the one just seems to have, I think everybody probably understands that Brooks needs some funding, but it just, it's not.
We can continue that discussion next week. We can, that's on number one,
because,
the basement rehabilitation, go ahead.
if I could, because he's coming to Historic on Wednesday.
Okay, fair enough,
So-
fair enough.
So
Yep.
I think that's.
So we'll hold that, and we'll
find out
hold
what we
8.
can find out.
And does the board want to vote tonight? It's on the agenda, it's here. Do we want to vote on the Cape Housing Institute, Affordable Housing Trust, lifeguard stands, sand pond restroom, White House field improvement, and the bike crossing lights? Or does the board, what's your pleasure? Would you rather wait till next week? We have the ability to do it now,
Vote now, I
I
would
say
say.
we vote.
okay?
Can I-
Ben, go ahead.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? The numbers that we're looking at in each of the buckets,
Yep.
is this what you gave us tonight?
Yep.
So, we potentially, under open space, under undesignated fund balance, we have 990,000 and change.
Right,
That would be 36, that is, no, 365 plus 36 for FY '18?
do you want,
Out where you're looking on this,
Okay,
oh, yeah.
so that's my only question, is what,
These two categories are added, these two columns are added together?
yes, at the bottom.
Isn't it, yeah, historic, the amount is 412,044. Housing is 480,295. Open space is 335,716. Designated is 990,926, for a total of 2,218,900.
Where are you reading that? 'Cause
He's reading the
Very
FY '20 estimated balances.
okay, so these numbers that we have here are not what we're supposed to look at? Isn't this a sheet we just got tonight?
That's the sheet I gave you the last time. I wanted a guideline for you to go by.
Okay, so, but we're not going by that.
Well,
No, for example, this particular sheet that I have in front of me says actual revenue, like community housing, $311,000, but that's not the number we're to use in trying to figure out what we have available?
no.
Okay, so I'm not gonna
The
look at this.
fiscal year 20 revenues, available funds estimated at these are the numbers, 412,044 historic,
Those are the estimated FY '20 numbers.
20s, right,
Plus, we have some money left
left over from,
in FY '18 that is our certified number.
you need to look at
So
that.
may I,
No, so what's the total? What is,
well, that's my,
Here's the total right here.
so my question or my suggestion is, could we maybe, because if we recall, last year, we had to meet before town meeting to clarify that what funds were coming out of estimated in 19 and what was coming out of
true.
existing.
All right,
So perhaps we should make sure that we have those exact numbers so that we know what's coming out of actual and what's coming out of estimated.
okay, they won't be exact numbers.
They don't need,
Okay,
so,
all right.
so I would suspect that we have exact numbers for 18,
We
because we know
have
it's certified.
We have
And
numbers.
we have
right,
estimated for 20.
That's correct.
So I think we will know what we can spend in 18. We will have a general idea of what we can spend in FY '20 as an estimated. But I think we need to make our motions to address it, because FY '18 money is immediately available after our meeting and after the vote. And
Right.
FY '20 is not available until July 1st. So I think it would serve us all better if we get those numbers, get some clarification on those numbers, so that we can do our own math before we make our motions, so that we're not having a meeting to correct it right before town meeting like we did last year. That's just my suggestion.
I don't remember doing that, do
We did, we met at 4 o'clock before our,
Remember? We had to change it. That was not a correction, though. That was,
it was a
changed
clarification.
the process
you?
on it.
Dynamics of how we.
Okay,
look
of how
at
we
it.
did it.
That's right,
I
exactly.
think we needed to
Yes.
clarify what we had voted.
But
And-
I agree.
Yeah, so,
I agree that we should have those two numbers in front of
Side by
us
side.
per category, and in case we need to take one from the other.
Okay,
Um,
John?
I need further clarification. So, I understand that the top of the second page here is balances, current balances, I guess, accounting for what's left over from 2019 and what's being returned, is that
so
correct?
FY '18. So,
Oh,
FY
he's
18.
looking at this.
Right.
So that is the balance carried forward estimated, but it's actual revenue,
as of
6/30/18.
So we closed our fiscal '18 books June 30th. The state certifies those numbers.
Yeah,
We're in the middle of 19. We can't spend 19 because we're in the middle of 19.
but
We can
And,
spend anticipated revenues of 20, so that's what this is.
and we also have from,
spend 19, is that what you just said?
Anticipated 20.
right,
Can't spend anticipated 20. but-
Yes, we can.
yes, we can.
We can't spend 19
not
because we're in the
certified.
middle of it. We're in the middle of 19, and once you're in the middle of a budget year, you can't spend your current budget year revenue. So, am I correct? Thank you.
Carol Coppola, Finance Director. You have the information in your hands. So would you like me to just come borrow one of your pieces of paper so I can reference it?
Everybody.
Carol.
This is what
Sorry.
we're
I
working.
know.
No, none of
They
us
don't
have that in front of us.
Then-
This is what you
then the
gave
chair-
us.
Then the chair may have dropped the ball.
So,
I just chased these numbers. That's,
can I try to restate my question?
Sure.
sure.
Which is, at the 2018 annual town meeting,
Yes.
the town agreed to spend X dollars in in these categories, and there was a certain amount of revenue estimated for fiscal year 2019,
Correct.
which ends in June.
Correct.
And the money we agreed to spend at the 2018 town meeting comes out of that revenue,
Correct.
or any balance that was
That
already
was
here.
Previous and seven.
Exactly.
These numbers on the top line, how do they relate to that?
So those are, if, I believe Carol can confirm, those are
Okay.
our certified numbers, what we already have, we know we have in existence, and the
Not-
bottom numbers are our estimated.
Okay, so at the top of the page, you're going to see balance to carry forward. These are the balances in the buckets, okay? These are the balances as of 6/30/18. These are certified by the Department of Revenue and audited.
So those don't include any spending that was agreed on at the 2018
include
meeting?
all
Or
spending.
any revenue that spending was based on?
They include all spending, so
That
we,
was agreed on at the 2018?
that's correct,
Oh.
that's correct.
So it's already
they-
All
subtracted.
those have been appropriated.
So it includes that, but it doesn't include the 2019 revenue?
That's correct,
Oh, okay, all right.
because it cannot.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
so your undesignated bucket as of June 30th was $365,749 and some change. And then you go across on that line, it's right at the top of the page. I'm happy to read the numbers. But open space had $167,304. Historic preservation, $189,732. And community housing, $311,884, for a total of $1,045,678. So then the committee has to consider that you have debt that is required to be supported for FY '20. There's debt payments that are general obligations of the town, which when the acts of the CPC were adopted by the town of Harwich, part of those acts included the responsibility to pay that debt. So first we have to subtract what's your debt. It's just like, you got to think about that when you're making money and you have a mortgage and you got to pay the mortgage, right? You got to pay the bank. So, but this is even more stringent than that. General obligation debt of the town. So that's the first thing that we're going to subtract here. So when we're looking at buckets, when you're making decisions of what you're going to fund, prior to adding in estimated revenues for FY '20, you have to take that into consideration. So that leaves your undesignated bucket in a deficit. So at that point in time, if you were not going to consider any FY '20 revenue to support any of these projects that you have on your list, you can't fund anything undesignated. You've actually got to make up that money, right? It's got to come from somewhere. But then you move forward and a little further down on that page, the committee voted to rescind an article that was previously approved for Brooks Academy. So that rescission put the money back into that bucket, which was your historic preserve bucket. So you could see that number there, that's actually adding into there, that balance, and that's $53,900. And the committee can do that. They can rescind articles that were previously voted. So
Carol, before you go any further, and just so you're aware, we've rescinded a total of $274,684.15.
prior to this, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Go ahead, Carol.
Prior to this decision of the $53,900.
That's correct.
Carol, where are you seeing that number, the 53? I don't,
The 53 is down here, I got it. It's right here.
oh, okay,
And
okay,
it's right in that historic
That's where the debt service.
column.
yeah,
I should call
that I
it out.
got,
You realize now you're going to have to give a seminar in this.
okay, okay.
Sorry, Carol.
I see
So,
it. I see it now.
So when you're considering voting on these, your articles are gonna state, where it's going to be funded from the FY '18 balance in historic preservation, or the FY '18 balance in open space. If it's gonna be funded by FY '20 estimated revenues, you have to state that in your article. And that was the change that we had made last year, kind of late in the game. So when you add in the estimated revenue for FY '20, I calculated that for you. You'll see the last line on this document. Now that takes into consideration the remaining balance of FY '18 too. And if that's confusing to you, I apologize.
So that's clear, but is all that, do you mind if I?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Is all that available to fund current projects? It is, right?
It is available.
Okay, fine.
I got it. I'm good.
John?
Now I'm confused again. So,
I got it.
I'm gonna keep
No,
at
good.
it until I'm not confused anymore, but that may take a while. So, what I just understood you to say 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago was the numbers at the top of the page include all the commitments that were made at last year's town meeting, but none of the revenue that those commitments were based on. That is fiscal 2019 revenues. But those fiscal 2019 revenues don't appear to me to show up anywhere here, so.
And that's intentional. Because it can't be
But
that's
you're showing-
intentional for this purpose. I'm happy to report your FY '19 revenues. I wouldn't hold that back from you at all. But for this purpose, you can't consider FY '19 revenue.
But you're showing FY '20 revenue.
Yes.
Because you can,
You have the ability to estimate that.
you
under-
do have the ability to
DOR.
estimate that, and that was in the document that I provided to the committee at your last meeting. And I also sent along a link to that document. And it's a guidance release from the Department of Revenue, and it stipulates in that you can use FY '20 estimated revenue to fund the projects that you are considering.
So, I'm sorry. But when we vote on an item here, what we're committing to, or what we're asking the voters to commit to, is spending funds from 2019 revenues.
No,
Okay, so
2020 revenues.
Or what's in the buckets
already
already from
existing.
18. That's
Correct.
been audited.
So,
We
okay,
can
somebody
deal-
has to explain to me why we can't consider
You can't-
2019
I'll
because.
take a second stab at it if I
Hold-
could.
Hold on,
Yeah.
just before.
Yeah.
This isn't the private sector. And that's exactly the way you're perceiving it.
Okay,
It's-
well,
It's municipal finance, and it took me 6 months to a year to learn the process. And I now understand the munis process. And it's way overboard, but what you're getting hung up in is, this is a municipal process.
I'm looking for the logic here, that's all, so.
There-
If I could, Mr. Chair, I'll take a quick stab at it.
Go ahead.
All of the money that we spend is nothing more than tax revenue. So
Yeah.
in the year that we're in the actual budget year, we can't spend current revenue. We have a budget, but we can't commit any further revenue until that money gets certified at the end of the fiscal year, and the state government tells Carol that yes, they agree with her, she has X money in an account. So we can essentially, our spending estimated FY '20 is exactly the same as us doing our FY '20 budget that we're budgeting for July 1st. It's taking tax revenue from the FY '20 budget, and we're committing it now for July 1st. And if we commit it before July 1st, we're good, but then once July 1st happens, we have to leave it alone until the state tells us it's money.
And year from now, you'll see this as 19. When they reconcile
Exactly.
19, if there's surplus, we get to spend that money.
Right.
Okay, so for the purposes of making a decision here about what money we have to spend, can we use these numbers at the bottom of the page? I mean, that's the bottom line question, right?
So I
That's,
think this was my follow-up for Carol.
Wait a minute. Hold on, please,
Yep.
Mary. Carol, can you answer that question, please?
I can. So I'm going to give you an example, okay? If that's
so
okay.
that's not a yes or no answer to that question?
Well, no, is there a yes or no answer to the question? You can use the numbers on the bottom of the page. However, you must separate them between FY18 and FY20 estimated revenue. So FY18 certified numbers, when you're writing an article, which the town will write for you, when we're writing an article and we're authoring an article, let's say we're authoring that article for $200,000, and that money is going to come from historic preservation. We're going to write that article so that it specifically states that $189,732.20 is going to come from FY18 certified balance, and that the remaining balance, which we'll calculate for you, is going to come from FY20 estimated revenue.
Okay,
that
all right.
help?
I got it.
Perfect.
Bob?
Can I throw in a question? You know how we have a deficit because of the first column? So can we go ahead and still spend in the open state historic and stuff the full amount there? Because we're actually overspending the total that's available to us.
Well, if you're considering FY20 estimated revenue, you are not
No,
overspending.
No, I get that.
But you,
I'm
so
just
what,
saying in 18, if we wanted to fund everything from 18,
Yeah.
because one of the column is negative, which we know has to come from 20, are we allowed to spend that full amount in those columns? In 18, for those individual columns? I think the answer is yes, but
I'm not an attorney, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to call the Department of Revenue.
oh, okay. Just curious.
What was the question again?
Hold on.
So
Wait,
Can I
the
follow
question
go ahead,
is that
restate.
because the negative on the undesignated fund balance, this is in the last box
Yep.
before we
Right.
get
Yep.
to the bold,
Yep.
is negative, it actually is subtracted from the total that's available. If you add up the three open space, historic, and community, that's more than 545, but because of the negative, it pulls it down.
I
So
believe,
I was just curious whether you could, because, whether you
believe
could
that if
spend
you-
the full
sorry.
amount out of 18.
I believe that if you stipulate that the funding for the debt is to come from FY20
20.
estimated receipts, you're
Then
fine.
it's zeroed out, and you're fine. Okay, I think so too.
All right.
Kevin?
Okay, I got it. Thank you. I forgot my question. Oh, so when we are writing up these, or when we're preparing a motion, would you prefer, from an accounting point of view, that we empty the bucket from FY18 before we, in other words, for example, if we had a request for
We didn't do that last year.
200,000 for open space, okay, and we wanted to take, would we take 167 from open space from FY18 and then the rest from FY20, or would we say, we're gonna take 100 from FY18 and 100 from FY20? Would you prefer that we empty the FY18 buckets?
It's irrelevant to me.
It's irrelevant, okay. Irrelevant, okay. So, for example, community housing, we have requests of community housing of $357,500. And FY18 has 311 plus change, so we would say in our motion, if we decided to approve that, we're taking 311,000 from FY18 and whatever the rest is from FY '20. Okay. Okay.
Mary?
I just had one clarification. Carol, it looks like your estimated FY '20 balance, you took into account the negative 187,000 that we were already in. So, in your opinion, then, if we wanted to dip into undesignated fund balance, we would have, is it the 365 plus the 990, or just the 990?
The 990.
Just the 990, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Randy, anything? Sure. Okay, John?
sorry, just one other question. Do we, tonight or this month, have to also vote on approving the debt service? That is, there was an article last year to have the debt service.
That's
So we have to do, we have to write the article, so we need to vote and agree that we're going to do that as well. So we have to
do it every year.
specify. Okay, so we have to take care of that as well.
Thanks. I would have said you might
Thank
attach
you,
return
Carol,
to-
for
Thank you,
explaining this to
Carol.
us for the 20th time.
Yeah.
And counting.
I know. I get it, and I still.
Yeah, well,
Okay, so we will, now that you all understand it, we can vote. It's too late, you want to, what is the pleasure of the board? You want to put it off till next meeting entirely? What's the
Yes.
pleasure of the board?
I think we should wait to
Then we
get
can
draft
the answers
motions.
from the other two.
Draft some motions.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at them.
Exactly.
Is everybody going to be here at the next meeting?
I'm available next week.
You what?
I said I am available
Oh.
next week.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Are you folks
then
available next week?
We'll vote on the 17th. And, well, my computer just went off, so. That's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Adjourned.
Aye.